Welcome everyone to Find Love and Keep Love in 2023. And the reason I've added the Keep Love on is because what my experience was and what many of my clients' experience has been is even if we find love, if we've struggled to have a healthy and loving relationship, we can struggle to stay in it once we've found it. Even get beyond the couple of date stage. So that's why this is find love and keep love. And that could be keep it after 2 months, 6 months, a year, or it could be keep it after 1 date, 2 dates, 3 dates, if you think you're on the right track, because often we self-sabotage. So I just want to introduce myself briefly to those of you who, oh dear, where's the share screen thing? Can't see it. It's gone. So oh, there it is. Just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Baldwin, and yes, I am a love, dating, and relationships coach, and the author of a book called How to Fall in Love, which you can see there in my wedding, on my wedding morning. I had my book there just for, product placement. And I got married a couple of years ago. But the journey up to that point was very complicated and difficult. And yeah, really struggling. Did I press record? Does anyone know if I pressed record? Thank you.
Yeah.
So the reason I do this work is because it took me many years to understand why I wasn't able to have healthy relationships, why I kept falling for unavailable people, why I ran away from people who were apparently emotionally available and into me, why I sabotaged myself all the time, why I lost faith, why I signed up to dating sites and never actually went on a date or contacted anyone. So why did I do all of those things? And in my late 30s, early 40s, I kind of made it my mission to understand why. And I'm quite a determined person. So I really went for it. And I studied a lot of counseling and psychotherapy, and I had a lot of therapy, and I worked myself out to get myself to a place where I could have a happy, healthy relationship. And as I said, the key is not just finding it, but actually then being able to stay in it and navigate it. And that's a whole other ball game. So what I want to talk about, and I'm going to stop the screen sharing now, and we're going to talk about this together. I want to talk about our obstacles. And for me, primarily, there are 2 sets of obstacles: our fears and our unhelpful beliefs. So if I were to think about the obstacles that stopped me from having a healthy and loving relationship, I can think about my fears. I can think about my fear of intimacy, my fear of commitment, my fear of being abandoned, my fear of ending up in a relationship with someone who I didn't actually want to be with, and then the fear of having to end it and having to hurt someone. So my fear of hurting someone else, my fear of not being good enough, my fear of being seen for all of who I was with all my foibles and flaws, and then of being found wanting, leading to abandonment and rejection. Fear of making a mistake, making the wrong choice, all those things, so many fears. And these come up a lot in my coaching practice. So our obstacles often made up by fears and also unhelpful beliefs about love, dating, relationships. So some of my unhelpful beliefs, for example, were that relationship equaled suffocation, equaled losing my freedom, equaled being trapped, being curtailed, having my wings clipped, relationship equaled boring, equaled ball and chain around my neck, just these thoughts and these beliefs. In my case, they came from my childhood, from witnessing my parents' experience of marriage and relationship. So, which was marry the wrong person, feel awful and miserable, then bring two children into it, don't have capacity to bring up those kids. And from my mother's viewpoint, feel trapped, feel suffocated, lost all my freedom, can't travel, can't have a career. Yeah, so I didn't want that for obvious reasons. So I don't think I ever really realized that those beliefs about relationships were so strong in me, that I didn't want a relationship for those reasons. So our fears and these unhelpful beliefs often stop us from having a relationship. They often sabotage our relationships. So when it comes down to finding love, and we can talk practically, and maybe these will be some of your questions, we can talk practically about how to find love, which dating sites and how to communicate with people and all those things. But we will continually sabotage ourselves if we don't understand ourselves on a really deep level. If we don't understand that we are placing obstacles in our own way. And often in life and in love, it's all about getting out of our own way, removing ourselves as the obstacle, our fears and our core beliefs. So for a moment, I would like you just to really think realistically, honestly about, and actually we'll do this. I'm going to invite you just to close your eyes for a moment. We'll do this together. Just to think realistically and honestly about the fears that stand in the way of you having a healthy relationship. So if you if you're in a comfortable spot and it's safe to do so, just close your eyes. And I know it can be hard to get into a sort of mindful, connected state when we're on these Zoom calls, but just see if you can, for a moment, allow yourself this moment of connection and peace. And I find it helpful to place a hand, you can't see me right now, but I've got both hands sort of crossed on my chest, near my heart. I find it helpful to connect with my body in order to connect with my feelings. So as you close your eyes, just take a few breaths. And we are here to talk about finding love and keeping love. And I'd like you to just consider this idea of finding love. Perhaps you want to visualize it. So imagine there's a big field, a big open field, and love is in the far corner of that field. Now, you might picture a beautiful person, beautiful man, a beautiful woman, beautiful person in the corner of that field. You might picture them standing there. They might be sitting, they might have a picnic for you. So picture that person. And you're in the other corner of the field. You want to go and find that person. So what stands in the way? If you think of the pathway from where you're standing now to where that beautiful person is, if you're able to stay with me with this visualization, Can you see any obstacles along that pathway? Can you see any big lumps in the road? Any obstacles that you have to cross, walk around? And as you take those steps towards that person, notice how you feel. So I've just been talking about fear. So as you make that journey, take those steps towards that person on the other side of the field. How do you feel as you get closer? Does anything come up for you? Do you have any fears, any sensations in your body, in your tummy, in your heart? Maybe it's excitement, and maybe you're rushing, maybe you're running across the field with open arms. Maybe you have no fear. Maybe you're completely sure of what you're doing. But notice if you have any sensations in your body, and notice in your path if there are any obstacles. So now you're getting closer to that person. Perhaps you can even reach out and touch them. Maybe you're filled with excitement, but maybe you're feeling confused, afraid, ambivalent, scared. And if you'd like to take it a step further, and if marriage or a committed relationship of another sort is in your dream, in your vision, perhaps you can imagine that commitment, perhaps a proposal or another form of commitment, and notice how you feel. Do you feel ecstatic, delighted, happy, unsure, uncertain, afraid, confused, torn in two? So if you were able to stay in that visualization a little bit, I'd like you to just bring your focus now back to your breath. And take a few deep breaths. And when you're ready, I'd like you to open your eyes. And if you have a notebook with you, just jot a few things down, any sensations that you connected with in your body, in your heart, and any physical obstacles that you witnessed in that field, on that path. And if any of you would like to, you're welcome to share them in the chat. That's helpful because it helps other people feel less alone, and it helps to, it really helps us to see that we're not alone. It helps to motivate and inspire us as well. So you're welcome to share them in the chat. Anyone who joined a little bit late, we were doing a visualization of a field, and at one end of the field, there was a person or dream person, and we were seeing in our mind's eye if we noticed any obstacles, physical obstacles or mental obstacles or blocks in the pathway towards that person, and also how we felt as we got closer to them. And if you're watching this on the recording, please, take some notes of Anything that came up for you there? Just have a look. So I'll share a couple of the comments without names. Terrified, heart pounding and throat when I imagine living together. Thank you for that honesty. Felt very sad. Okay, I wonder if you'd like to elaborate whether that was a sadness of the years that had passed, of how long it had taken, of regret, or a sense that being in the relationship would be sad. A sense of despair, someone says, never going to get there. Okay, fear walking down the path and sharp metal objects in the way on the path. So that's a vivid visualization, sharp metal objects. Okay, I'm not sure there's anyone in my field. That's what I fear most. Thank you for sharing that honestly. Anxious, like the person was a mirage and not who they portray themselves to be. So a sense of, a sense of fear, but also of not trusting the person, or not trusting a man or woman or person to be who they portray themselves to be. So that's an interesting insight. Joyful, sunny day, beautiful long grass, skipping across the field, then fear, shame, my past, scared of being hurt again, failing and compromising, losing me. Thank you. Lots of what ifs. What if I'm not good enough for him? What if we can't talk about all the real issues when things get difficult? What if I haven't learned from past failures and can't get through difficult times? Thank you. Couldn't imagine the person. Can't find anyone I'm attracted to. Okay, so maybe the fears are there. So if I often, I think the fears probably are there. I think I probably did a very good job in, well, definitely for many decades, of convincing myself that I didn't have any fear of relationship. In fact, I had lots of relationships, one after another, short ones, long ones, reasonable ones, disastrous ones. So how could I possibly be afraid of relationship? I appreciate this is different from what was shared, that I didn't find people that you don't find people attractive. But I couldn't imagine that I was afraid of relationship. I was just so courageous in and generally drunk. So that gave me a lot of courage to date people. But it was only when I really sort of sat down to look inside myself, to really explore the blocks and the obstacles, the inner ones primarily, did I realize that I had all these fears. It's lovely to begin with. Not feeling self-love, all of a sudden, don't believe it, embarrassment, not feeling comfortable. Okay. So as you can hear, just one more, a sense that could anyone really love me enough to make a true commitment? So being with someone who's more of a friend for 10 years, not sure where it's going or if it could go anywhere. Thank you so much for sharing. I love doing these workshops because everyone is always so open and vulnerable, and we see that we're definitely not alone. I hope it's also clear that as you know, obviously, especially today, dating and all that, it's quite difficult. There's all the apps and the dating apps and dating websites, and then there's real life, and there's our age, and there's our stage, and there are things to deal with. So it's not the easiest of processes. But what makes it incredibly difficult, and also what means that we often shoot ourselves in the foot and don't want to keep going and don't want to try again, is because we're dealing with all of these things that we're sharing right here. We're dealing with a huge number of fears. We're dealing with beliefs about people, that they're not trustworthy. We're dealing with memories from our past of being hurt, both back in our childhoods and often in previous relationships. So we're dealing with a lot of things. Somebody says they're excited about finding the person, lots of twists and turns along the path, fearful of making another mistake and choosing the wrong person again. So I'm just going to get out my big drawing pad, because what we're talking about here, here's our person. I'll show you this in a minute. I'm not the best drawer, but hopefully it'll help. Person, a big smile. And here's us. And here's our obstacles, all different shapes and sizes. This is what I've done. It's very simple. You could even do this yourself. So we want to know, here's us, and here's our person. And this is what stands in the way. Maybe they're small for you, maybe they're big. Somebody said about the sharp, spiky objects. We need to, I'm pretty sure that all of you are here because you'd really like to get to here, or perhaps over the top or around the side. And that actually is a good question. I was writing about this today in a blog. First of all, we need to know, because we've got some obstacles to overcome. So we do need to know, firstly, that we really do want to get there. We need to know that we really want to get there, because it's not the easiest of journeys. It doesn't have to be the hardest of journeys either, but there might be a few hiccups. So we do need to know that we want to get there. And what's apparent from some of the comments is there's some ambivalence, there's some uncertainty as to whether we want to get to the relationship or to the commitment. And, totally relate to that. If you've read my book or read anything or been on these workshops before, you will know that ambivalence runs through me like those words run through the stick of Blackpool rock, and that my relationship history is all about ambivalence, as is my relationship to being a parent, which I'm not, but my feelings around motherhood were the same, and my feelings around lots of areas of my life actually are ambivalence, and it's very debilitating and takes up a lot of energy. So, as my therapist calls it, it's like having one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. So one foot on the accelerator, I want a relationship. I really want to find love. You're at a workshop called Find Love and Keep Love. I want to move forwards. You have another foot on the brake, because there's all these pressures that we've talked about. There's the fears, there's the doubts, there's the questions, there's the possible lack of self-esteem or lack of self-love. So if we're trying to find love with one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake, we're stuck. We're literally not moving forward. So we need to find a way to take the brake off a little bit, but not too fast, so we dive straight into something that isn't good for us or suitable or appropriate for us. So firstly, and you might need to do this outside of this workshop, but I'd like you to get really honest with yourself about whether you do want a relationship. And that perhaps is doing a little bit more work along the lines of what's been shared in the chat. Getting really clear about your fears and really clear about the doubts and the ambivalence. Because it can be exhausting to go on lots of dates and keep on with that search, but keep hitting a brick wall or not finding what we're looking for. That is exhausting, I know, because I've done it. It's also exhausting being on lots of apps and dating sites and never doing anything on them. And it's expensive. So So we want to get clear on whether we want a relationship. But the biggest question I have for you is, if we need to go from here to here, we need to go around these obstacles or over these obstacles or through these obstacles or through our fears, how are you going to do it? Now, I'd like just to hand that back to you for now, for this moment. And I'd like you to have a think about some of the obstacles and fears you have shared. And I'd like you to think about how you are going to overcome them. And if you have any thoughts on that, please share them in the chat. I will share some thoughts in a moment. But think about the obstacles that some of you have identified, and think about how you're going to overcome them. How might you get through them, over them? And again, this is something you might want to build on after this workshop. And if you're watching on the recording, please take some moments now to think about, how am I going to get through these obstacles? I appreciate it's not the easiest of questions, but it's an important question. Brilliant. Building self-love and self-esteem. I was just writing that down. Understanding my fears and triggers and healing trauma. Yeah, brilliant. So if you have any more ideas, please jot them down in the chat if you'd like to. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I think we can get over those obstacles or around those obstacles. Someone says, torn between feeling I need to be in a certain space before I try again, but will I ever be? And is it just a way of putting it off? Find out early on if someone is emotionally available, because that's what you're looking for. Feel the fears and realize when my fears are triggered. Yeah. Being clear on boundaries and vision for my relationship and future hopes and aspirations. This is all brilliant stuff. So this is a reminder, I hope, that while I'm here leading this workshop, that you have your answers inside yourself. And we do need support. I believe we need support to draw them out, just as I had support to draw out my answers, and still do have support to draw out my answers. But, you know, if you could truly trust yourself and your inner wisdom and your inner voice, you have the most incredible answers for yourself. So I just want to think about the, I talk a lot about the foundations. I have a course called Laying the Foundations, and a lot of my work is based on this layering up of our essential elements so that we can date in a healthy way. And we will all be at different stages on this journey, but the connection to yourself is absolutely vital. I'm just thinking about that woman who's in one corner of a field, and there's a gorgeous person in the other corner of a field. So if you think of yourself as that woman in one corner of that field, who does she need to be? Who does that woman need to be in order to take that journey across the field? Who does she need to be? She needs to be someone who, and this sounds basic, who loves herself, who has a healthy sense of self-esteem and self-worth. Maybe, if you're a visual person, you could draw during the workshop or afterwards, you could draw a picture and you could write words or draw some more pictures around yourself. So we're talking about strong sense of self-love, healthy self-esteem, a sense of being lovable. And that means that if we feel entirely lovable, we don't mind being fully seen for who we are. So feeling fully lovable, having a good degree of confidence, loving our bodies as much as possible. So who does that woman need to be? So self-love, self-esteem. You may have heard me talk about that inner oak tree. It's in chapter 2 of my book, but an emotional core that is strong and resilient, deeply rooted, well nourished, well nurtured. And I know life happens and we are busy and it's not always easy to nourish and nurture ourselves. But one of the things we want to understand is why we find it so hard to nourish, nurture, and love ourselves. Because if we're not loved, if we don't love ourselves, nourish and nurture ourselves, then imagine that person going into a romantic relationship. What do you think the outcome will be? And then we've got a person who is full of self-love and healthy self-esteem and well nourished and well nurtured, and she goes into a relationship. Different outcome. So self-love, self-esteem, confidence, emotional resilience. Now, we talked about our fears. We want to be really clear on our fears. And a lot of the work that I do is around getting really honest with ourselves about our fears and where they come from. I shared some of mine. Often our fears are rooted in our childhoods. We might have grown up in traumatic situations. If your early life relationships were painful, traumatic in some way, if you didn't get your emotional needs met, then, that leaves its wounds and its scars when it comes to having a romantic relationship. Romantic relationships are hugely intimate, obviously, and our first memories of hugely intimate relationships are with our primary caregivers, our parents or caregivers. So that's why the romantic relationship is so hard, because it presses so many buttons and lets off all our triggers and our fears. And some of you will have heard me share this, but some of our early life experiences, if our emotional needs and physical needs, obviously, but if all our needs aren't met when we are young, very young, and we're dependent, that feels life-threatening. So our lives feel in danger because our needs aren't being met. And then we gather all these patterns and habits and ways of trying to stay safe and defend ourselves. So we have these defenses. And for me, binge eating, compulsive overeating was both a defense against my pain and a defense against other people. Because if I was several stone overweight, which I was through my 20s and 30s, then early 30s, then people wouldn't find me attractive and I wouldn't have to face the consequence of being in a close relationship. So we have our defenses, and just think for a moment about your defenses and what you're defending yourself against. If you have some defenses, maybe you could write this down in the chat. If you have some defenses, what might they be? Do you keep people at arm's length? Do you have a way of disconnecting from yourself through eating or not eating, through drinking or other patterns? Is one of your defenses to fall into a relationship with unavailable people. So that defends you, that protects you from true intimacy. So what are your defenses, and what are you defending yourself from? And that thing that you're defending yourself from will be your fear, your deepest fears. And one thing, we do this work on my retreats, and I know someone here has been through this experience where we look at our deepest fears, and then we try and walk towards them with support, identifying the kind of support that we need to walk towards our fears. So we want to look at our fears, our defenses, what we're trying to defend ourselves against, and how those defenses and fears lead us into certain patterns in our romantic relationships. We want to look at the things that we're holding on to. We want to consider, this was mentioned, our boundaries. So our boundaries with ourselves, our boundaries when we go dating. We want to have, a clear vision of the person that we'd like to be with, not a sort of tick list, not a load of judgments, but a clear vision of the values that we would like. All these things, if you think about, if we think about this idea of accelerator and brake, we have these things pulling us into relationship, the things that we know might be good about a relationship, the connection, the intimacy, the support, the partnership, the fun, the laughter, all those things. And hopefully you have a long list of the good. And then on the brake side, we've got these fears of intimacy and losing ourselves and making the wrong choice. So obviously we want this accelerator list to be bigger than the brake list, and we want the accelerator force to be stronger than the brake force that's pulling us backwards. So how can you get more acceleration? How can you get more acceleration? Now, that might be something some of you might have some ideas about that. How can you get that accelerator going? One of the ways is to get rid of some of the fears or walk through some of the fears. But, I know from my own experience that the only way out is through. And the only way, to achieve all of our dreams in life, be that love, be that wonderful career, wonderful life, is to walk through our fears. So you will probably have heard the acronym of fear: false evidence appearing real, or we could say flip everything and run, or a different word to flip if you like. But false evidence appearing real. And this relates to how our past, often we project our past onto present situations. So maybe it was shared in the chat that there's a person in front of me, but I don't trust them to be who they say they are. So that, obviously we want to discern whether they are a good person, but that could be false evidence appearing real. We could be projecting our past experience of being with untrustworthy people onto this beautiful person who isn't untrustworthy at all. So that is false evidence appearing real. So we want to dismantle these fears. We want to dismantle these fears as best as we can. And I believe we do that by talking about them, by journaling about them, by sharing about them with people who might experience similar things or might have been on that journey. A lot of the work I do with my one-to-one clients is about really nailing their fears. Where do they come from, and how are they showing up today? So often what happens with my clients, and it happened with me too, is we meet someone who is actually really good for us, a really good person, wants to be with us, emotionally available. And then we find all manner of reasons why we don't want to be with that person because they're not this, or they're not that, or they're not good enough, or they're not. And my job often with my coaching is to convince people to give it to give it more of a shot, to give it a bit more time, to not jump to those judgments and those conclusions, and to understand what is driving us away, back to being single, back to searching for someone else. Now, you might be in that experience or have had that experience, or you might have that experience soon where you are with someone and you think, nah, not for me. Now, we want to pause there and we want to dissect that, nah, not for me. We really want to drill down into that and figure out what's going on there. You might be having a different experience, which is, no, there is nobody, there is no one for me. There's nobody on the internet, there's nobody in real life. I never meet anyone. And again, you know, some of this will be practical and knowing where to go, or how to manage an online profile and all of that, but some of it will be fear. So some of it will be self-sabotage and fear. And there is a way through it. There is a way through it. It really is about understanding, how did I get here? How did I get here? And what do I need to overcome these obstacles and these fears? So if you have any more ideas of what you might need to get through here, then please write them down. Understanding, understanding when we're triggered. So if you imagine, several people have mentioned the word triggered in the chat, and just for clarity, when we're triggered, it's often that our buttons are pressed and we have what's called an emotional flashback. So we remember a time in our childhood, perhaps, where being in a relationship was frightening. Perhaps someone was drinking, or perhaps someone said something horrible to us, or perhaps someone left us. All those things happened in my childhood, actually. Someone was drinking, someone was horrible to me, and someone left. All when I was very little, or, less than 10, as a sensitive girl. So those incidents leave marks. And so when I am in my present day life, putting myself in similar situations, like trying to have a relationship, I sometimes have these emotional flashbacks. Oh, I remember this. I remember getting close to someone. Oh, I know what happens. Someone leaves, someone says something horrible, or someone drinks and gets angry with me. Okay, I'm not going to do it then. And I am going to come up with excuses. And I don't want to be harsh with that, because some of our reasons are real. Perhaps there isn't. Perhaps it's hard to find appropriate people on the internet or real life, but I don't think it's impossible. I absolutely don't think it's impossible. But we come up with these reasons not to try, or not to take action, or we take self-sabotaging action, like choosing people, spending time with people who aren't right for us. So just to recap, and this is, you can do some more of this work after the workshop. So, we have you, we have the person on the other side of the field, and we have the obstacles in the middle. And you know the way through. You know the way around those obstacles. Those obstacles will probably consist of fears, of core beliefs about relationships. And you can do this work as well. You can write a list of your core beliefs about relationships, the positive ones and the negative ones. And they will likely consist of these emotional triggers, these emotional flashbacks. They'll be in those obstacles too. So we want to get to know ourselves. We want to understand ourselves on a really deep level. We want to understand our triggers and where they come from. We want to grow as much as possible in self-love, self-esteem, self-awareness, self-acceptance. And I know this all sounds like a hell of a lot of hard work, but it might be. But the benefits are worth it. And it doesn't have to be that hard if we can get out of our own way. And we want to keep building those foundational layers. So I can't cover all of this in a short workshop, but I'd like you to type any questions in the chat. Now, one of the keys to just any dating and relationship questions that I can come on to in a moment. But one of the keys to walking through our fears, from my personal experience and from helping lots of my clients, is not doing it on your own. So imagine you're afraid of the dark and you're in a room and you're on your own. So your fear of the dark is going to be pretty huge. Imagine you're afraid of the dark and you have a really great person, friend, mentor, group of people standing next to you. Hopefully you will feel less afraid. And my whole journey to love, to marriage, was characterized by lots and lots of help and support, and not doing it on my own. So I have a couple of things I'd love to share with you in terms of how I can support you. I just want to share the story of to give you a bit of hope, the story of a couple of my clients who overcame some of the things we've been talking about. So we're talking about obstacles, fears, and unhelpful beliefs. So, so I worked with Anne, who, oops, why isn't that going that way? Sorry. I worked with Anne, who got married last year, sorry, not this year. And she had lots of fears about being married, about being in a committed relationship. She had certain judgments on her partner, certain fears about, is he this, is he that? Are we compatible? Is it going to work? But she walked through them with support, and I received some wonderful photos of her proposal, wedding proposal, engagement, and her marriage. And the same with GA, another client of mine. Again, she came to me with lots of fears about, but I'm this kind of person, and he's this kind of person, and I don't like this about him, and we're not compatible in this way, and I should be with this sort of person. And we worked through it, and she got married last year too. And Becky, she had lots of fears about being committed, about choosing the person, about making a mistake with that person. She's now married and having a baby. She came to me younger than lots of my clients. And another client of mine who is planning her wedding for this year, she was part of my online group coaching program, and with some fear and trepidation, she began dating. And again, as I said earlier, what happens with a lot of my clients is they meet someone, they meet a good person, because they've done their work on themselves, because they've laid their foundations, they meet a good person. But then they want to leave that person because he looks this sort of way, or he, as I have shared about my now husband, because of his teeth and because of his hair that was long when I met him, and because of his job that he did, and because of all these things that were totally surface level, and I wanted to run away because of my fear. So we overcome our fears, and I believe we do that together with support. And as Rachel says, we've got to go deep, and we've got to get to the bottom of stuff. And I do pride myself in getting to the bottom of stuff that other people don't always reach. And as KS said as well, we got to the bottom of stuff that she hadn't figured out in years of therapy. And I'm proud of that. I do believe that, I help my clients go really deep. So I would love to support you, and I am starting out with something in the first 14 days of February, and I'll share the link to that in a moment. It includes a daily message for you, inspiring message, and a opportunity to be part of a group, as well as a Zoom call. And then following those 14 days of February, I'm going to launch into a ongoing support program for you. So let me just, I think that's the end of that. Let me just come back. Yeah. Oh, before I go, before I drop the share, if you are really ready for some support, one of the clients I mentioned who's getting married this year, she came on my retreat and then did some one-to-one coaching. This is my Dorset retreat, February the 17th. So in about 3 weeks' time, here in Dorset, not far from Bournemouth. And I can show you a bit more of that in a moment. And you can book a free discovery call with me. I offer one-to-one coaching, which is incredibly powerful. I have my courses, and I'm going to incorporate my courses into the program that I'll talk about after the 14 days of love and my retreats and so forth. So you will get an email with all this information. So I just want to stop the share, and before I take your questions, I'm just going to share this bit actually. This. Yeah, I just want to show you the retreat in Dorset, which happens on the 17th of Feb. It's a small group retreat for women. It's incredibly powerful. The B&B is gorgeous. It's just a few minutes from the beach. I'm incorporating the beach sauna and swim in the sea for those of you who are brave, but after the sauna, it's wonderful. So have a look at that. I will send a link, and this is for the 14 days of love. I will pop a link to that in the chat. So we're going to be using something called Telegram, which is like WhatsApp. So we'll be connected to each other. You'll be connected to me. I'll be sharing voice notes, and then we'll have a Zoom call. So I'm going to share the link to that in the chat. So let me just stop sharing that. So now I'm going to come to your questions, but I absolutely encourage you to join. I'm just going to put the link to the 14 Days to Love in the chat. To join that, because you know, the power of support. I mean, there are people here who've been on my retreats, who have been on my online courses, group programs, and I know that many of you have hugely benefited from not doing it on your own. And I know many of us are these, you know, independent, strong women, perhaps because we have had to be, perhaps because when we were young, the support wasn't there. Perhaps we find it hard to ask for help. Perhaps we struggle to be vulnerable, and we think we can do it all on our own. Now, you can try, and I did, and then I got support and everything changed, and that has been the same for many of my clients. So I would love you to join me on the 14 days, and I will send the link round. So I'm just going to answer the questions. I'm just going to answer the questions that have come up, and then I'll switch the recording off and we can have a chat. Thank you, Pip, who's gone, I think, to teach. Yeah. And Nimira. Okay, so what do you do if you're in a situation where your family is constantly trying to set you up with someone and you feel pressured to say yes when you want to say no? I hear that that is challenging, and that's, you know, having your family pressuring you. I believe that you know the answer to that. That the only healthy, life-saving choice for you is to be authentic, real, and courageous, and stand up for yourself, even if that means jeopardizing some of those family relationships. Because ultimately you want your own family. You want to form your own family, and you want that to be the right family for you. and we've all experienced, either as children or with friends around us, marriage breakdown, relationship breakdown, divorce, people like my parents who got into the wrong relationship right from the start, and the sort of layers of damage that it does to them, to children that are in the relationship. So I think you take some distance from them, get lots of support. If you're not able to stand up to them, you take some distance from them, because it sounds like they're not helping you. So I'm just going to see if there are any more questions here. There was another question on the that came by email, which is about finding someone with the same hobbies, or do we need to find someone with the same hobbies and interests as us? It's helpful to have something in common. My husband and I have sort of outdoorsy stuff in common. We like doing outdoorsy stuff together, but also we're very different in some ways. I do all this personal development stuff and therapy and read all these books, and he doesn't do any of that. I love to dance. He doesn't like dancing. And I think, really you're looking for a solid, secure, healthy relationship. And I think the hobbies and interests, that will work itself out. You want your early dates to be based on stuff that you enjoy together, or perhaps something you enjoy and then something that the other person enjoys. So I think that's important, but I wouldn't get too hung up on these things. I'm just going to go back to the beginning, see if there are any questions. Yeah. Not sure if there are any specific questions at the beginning. So I am going to, in a moment, switch off the, I'm going to switch off the recording. So those of you watching on recording, those of you who are still here, please stay on if you'd like to have a chat. If you're watching on the recording, you will also receive the links to the 14 Days of Love, and to the retreat, and to everything else that I have on offer. And if you take the 14 Days for Love, after that, you'll be invited to stay on for some more support in a different format, and I'll explain more about that when we get there. So I'm going to stop the recording.